why we are now very clear that that case and the outcome of that case was fraudulent in a variety of ways.
Yes, well, he developed an economic base for us as African people, and certainly within the United States and around the world too. The organization itself, through the Negroes Factory Corporation, he had many industrial efforts, such as the Negro Factories Corporation itself, but there was the doll factory, there was the millinery factory, there were restaurants, there were laundromats, there was the publishing company, the printing press that did all of the printing in Harlem. So in New York and in Harlem itself, I mean, the UNIA had more than 1,000 employees. So it was a community that was able to develop itself on its own economic foundations. So as I mentioned before, with 6 million members, clearly that was beginning to develop an economic threat. And also then with an economic foundation like that, then both a political and a social threat to the structure that you just mentioned, which was basically a white supremacist structure. So he was targeted, the organization was targeted, and he was personally targeted. And they brought charges against him in 1922 of using the mails to defraud because of his signature project, which was the Black Star Line Shipping Company, which was a way in which, because all cargo moved on the sea at that time. There was not the air traffic that we have at the present time. Everything went by the sea. Just as you said, everything went by newspaper and by word of mouth at that time. So you had the Negro World newspaper, which went around the world in three languages, Spanish and French in terms of the editorial page. And he developed the Black Star Line Shipping Company to link the Africans in the Americas with the Caribbean as well as with the continent, both for trade as well as for travel, because they were being discriminated against in travel, even though, of course, they would, just like sitting in the back of the bus, so to speak, it was the same thing. They're sitting in the back of the boat, if you will, not getting the services when they paid for the services. So this was a novel thing at that time, and very, very important to link the diaspora with the continent. So he was targeted, certainly by other leaders who had different ideas about how to liberate African people, as well as at that time J. Edgar Hoover, who had the precursor of the FBI, and he had an internal memo as far back as 1919 that there was, and I'm quoting, a Negro agitator up in Harlem who is, causing trouble, and we have to find some way to charge him with something so that we can, get him out of the country as an undesirable alien. So he was targeted by J. Edgar Hoover. It was trumped up charges. The whole trial itself was a farce. There was no evidence. There was an empty envelope. There was a witness who perjured himself, who said he worked for the UNIA, but it was brought out that he didn't. He was coached in perjury by the prosecuting attorney. The judge should have recused himself. And, we can go on and on with the illegality of the trial, but it was a farce, and it was total injustice. Ended up, my father got the maximum sentence, 5 years in jail, maximum fine, and he was imprisoned. And then after 3 years in jail with a different president, Calvin Coolidge, a different attorney general, they saw the ridiculous nature of the injustice itself, and they commuted a sentence. But then he was deported from the United States. So that was a way to help to, shall we say, destroy his ability to be a leader of African people and to fragment the organization.
So I want us to be clear when we're talking about the legacy, folks. We don't just talk about history. We don't take a Sankofa approach. And you all know I love the Sankofa principle. It's that principle that tells us we have to look to our past to understand our present and build for the future. We don't just recount these histories so that we can revel in the glory days of what was beyond. We recognize and we study this history so that we can replicate what needs to be replicated and build upon the successes that were there. This is a gentleman who, again, no internet, no Yahoo, no Google, no nothing. Had the printing press, the Black Cross nurses. So that was our medical community, our printing press, the media community, the laundromat services, actually engaging in businesses that we use and that we need, hiring over 1,000 people at the UNIA in just Harlem. This is what it looks like to build a Kujichagulia, a self-determining community. Obviously, at that time, and dare I say today, these sorts of moves are going to be considered destabilizing to the white supremacist establishment. And so that court case, as you said, saying that there was mail fraud with an empty envelope, nothing in it. Just anybody can just pick up an envelope and say, you see, there is my evidence. And it was accepted into court. The perjuries and all the things that really intended to undermine the legitimacy of this legal proceeding, which had very real world impacts. That him being deported and the enmity that was able to be used to stoke divisions between he and some of the other leaders at that time are all lessons that we have to learn. And now, these many years later, sir, you are continuing the fight to have your father's name cleared with a pardon. How is that effort going? I know that there was a petition previously. Where are we with the current effort to have the criminal charges, the allegations, and the conviction removed from his record so that he can rest in not only in peace and power, but rest with a clear name that recognizes that what happened to him was an unjust form of persecution?
Yes, and I just want to say something about, exoneration and pardon. We're seeking an exoneration, and we've been on this road since 1987, when we appeared before the congressional committee with John Conyers and Congressman Rangel from Harlem, and we've been on that trail as subsequent. And House resolutions have been in the Congress over time to exonerate Marcus Garvey. But that's a very political process, and so far it has not succeeded in clearing in passing, through the Judiciary Committee, where it ends up when it gets to Congress. It goes into the Judiciary Committee. They have to debate it, and then they have to approve it, and it goes to the general body. But this has not happened over time. So one of the ways to shortcut that would be to get a posthumous pardon from the president. But it's a pardon that would have to say that an injustice was committed and no crime was committed. So we're trying to use the posthumous pardon process in order to exonerate him, because that's the prime effort to clear his name. So we've also been on that trail since President Obama in 2016. We presented the documentation to him of his innocence and the farcical nature of the trial. He did nothing about it. We have appealed to President Biden over time, and also in his second term, as well as to Kamala Harris. We've had petitions with over 100,000 signatures that have been sent to the White House. So we're continuing with that, and we're hoping that in the fading days, shall we say, of Biden's presidency, he may see fit to do that posthumous pardon to exonerate Marcus Garvey. So that's where we are at the present time.
This is significant because, we're entering an era where the legal or the political environment is going to get extraordinarily more difficult for these
Yes.
sorts of efforts. And so what is it that you need the audience to do to help support you in this goal? Because we're happy to sign the petitions. We're excited about doing that. Should we be calling the White House? Should we, because on this show, we give ourselves assignments to act on the information that we're learning.
Yes.
How should the audience mobilize in order to support this effort?
I would say directed to the White House at this time, right to the president. Like you said, it's his final days in office. He may want to leave a legacy, something related to justice in terms of the whole American, body politic. And, we are entering an era of uncertainty. So we're not sure what's coming up after January the 20th. But we'll see. But we need to maximize our efforts at the present time. And I would say write directly to the president, as many of you as possible, asking for the posthumous pardon for Marcus Garvey to clear his name of any criminal charges.